Welcome to About Money, a different approach to investing you won't hear anywhere else. Your hosts, the AFC team, Mike and Al, are registered investment advisors who have a proven track record of managing long-term investments surpassing the markets. The information shared on the following program is for educational purposes only, and any investment advice given may not be suitable for all investors. And now, here's your AFC team, Mike and Al.
And it's Saturday. We have the answer about money. About money, the answer. It is Saturday, and we have a lot to talk about. You know, you can find hundreds, maybe even thousands types of books on how do you make money in the stock market? How do you make money on investments? And I believe that most of those books, if you follow what they say, you will make money. It may not be very much. It could be a whole lot. But how do you really determine if they're really worth it? Are you going to make enough money to pay for what you paid for the book? That's a question to begin with. How do you tell? We're going to talk about that later in the program. One of the things that we've been talking about, and we've been talking about it for years, is what's happening in China. We talked about how a backward economy became the second largest economy in the world. But what's happening now? Things have changed. We're going to talk about that. Al's got a lot of information on what's happening. And if you listen to the debates this week, you know that one of the key issues that politicians are talking about, business owners are talking about, is China. What's really going on? I think we have been ahead of the curve in the past few years. We think we still are. And that's coming up. We have guests today. We have two guests. And you want to hear what they have to say. One is an author. She did her autobiography, but they run a business, a mom and daughter business. You want to hear what they have to say about their business and about the book. But let's kick it off. Al, talk to us about China.
China. So, Mike, everyone's been predicting that China's after they got out of COVID, and that we were going to see this, you know, the economy's growth continue to go forward. That hasn't happened. They've had real estate problems that, just keep getting worse and worse. It seems they're like at a 2008 crisis going on. We've seen Evergrande just filed Chapter 15, but more than that, there was another company called, let me find it, Country Gardens, which was considered the bellwether. It was less aggressive than Evergrande, and it was considered the safe of safe. And that is having huge problems right now. They're looking at that. Potentially, they can't pay their bond of $22.5 million. And that's causing huge problems.
Not just for people in China, but a lot of Americans on that bond as well.
Yeah. But more than that, they have other problems, like they're disillusioned young people. The unemployment rate for people 16 to 24 is 21%. It's so bad over there that the government stopped publishing the data. And their their equivalent to the Federal Reserve is not doing the job that needs to be done to spur the economy to get it going again.
So why are they not doing that?
I don't have a good answer for it. I don't know. I mean, they lowered interest rates by only 15 basis points.
Isn't it in part because they don't believe that lowering the interest rates are going to stimulate the economy?
I think it goes deeper than that, if I had to put my finger on it. I would say that it goes to an ideology that Xi has, because he grew up in the Maoist regime, which is a really hardline regime. He was basically doing manual labor for the early parts of his life. And he's telling people now that are unemployed, he's telling them to go work in factories. Kids that are getting educations, he's telling them to go work in a factory, and oh, by the way, you're going to be making military equipment, which potentially could be used against them the way that regime operates. And he's telling them to, I think his term was, to eat bitterness, to work something to like work really hard and eat bitterness. And the kids don't want to eat bitterness. They're saying this isn't something we want to do. You know, we have our guest today who knows something about eating bitterness, and if you read her book, and it's not real fun to eat for a long time. And so they're instilling this ideology from them that maybe worked in the past generations when you're building bridges and digging ditches and trying to build infrastructure. But they have all the infrastructure. They can't build any more really advanced infrastructure. And so their economy needs to evolve and grow. And I think she's ideology and the psychology of what he's putting on his people is causing that economy to actually crater, excuse me.
You know, part of it is that they're not building a consumer economy.
That is.
It's a centrally planned economy. It's an economy where she and the Politburo, the Central Committee, determine what should happen and who should be where and what happens.
Well, she is cracking down on private tutoring. He says it exploits the educational anxiety of Chinese parents. Okay. The other thing is people they thought when they got rid of the one child policy that people were going to start having kids again. Everything they've done, tax breaks, cash payments, has not spurred fertility.
And maybe that's good because so many are unemployed to begin with.
Yeah, I know. But so these are the issues that are facing the country, and they're not being dealt with in a way that's going to advance the country. All he cares about right now is building the military and dominating, dominating trade, building his Silk Road around the world, and trying to dominate ports around the world, and looking at Africa and all these other places. But I think it's having a drastic effect on his own country.
And a lot of things are breaking down real estate wise. But when you look at how they value and how they issued their bonds, they valued property almost at the same valuation as Bellevue, Washington. I mean, for a populace that has a much, much, much lower income, they still are pumping out property and valuing it for their bond issue at much higher prices.
Yeah, the average Chinese was making around equivalent about $600 to $800 a month.
Yep.
And their real estate prices, if you look per square meter in one of their large cities, was roughly about the highest was about $7,000 a meter. So 1,000 square foot apartment is going to cost you somewhere around $700,000.
Mm-hmm. With an income of $300 or $500,
yeah, $600 or $700 a month.
It's like the taxi driver in Bellevue that bought the $2 million condo that, back
before 2008, yeah.
Before 2008.
When they had the no income verification loans. I got one of those, by the way. It's something where they're not making the shift in the economy. It's centrally planned. Yeah, but it's funny because Ray Dalio, who you and I have talked about, he runs a hedge fund in Connecticut. It's about $160 billion, wrote a book, The Changing World Order, predicting China would surpass the U.S. in the world currency. And he pointed out all these reasons for why China's going to advance past the U.S. And with their ideology and the way they do things, I just don't see how they can do that with that mentality.
Even innovation is very different in China. I've talked about it before. If you look at China and consider it like an agricultural place, they've planted lettuce in exact straight rows. Everything is cultivated. Everything is manicured. Everything is just perfectly set. If you look at America, we're like a rainforest. Weeds, nothing's cultivated. But what that leads to is the innovation. You cannot imagine that somebody would have come along and said, we can build an electric car that appeals to people that buy Mercedes. The Chinese can make small innovations and add to what's going on. But to really make the big changes and the big innovations, that's not happening.
Yeah, but we're willing to break things down and reinvent ourselves constantly they're not willing to do that. I mean, he's telling entrepreneurs that people are graduating, you're going to be building, the future of the country. But in reality, when they look at it and see these young kids getting out, they're saying, wow, look what happened to Jack Ma. He took his power away, took his company away from him, and no one hears from him again.
He's reemerged.
Yeah, I know, but not the guy he was before. He went to re-education camp, and what he needed to do. I mean, and there's a surge of Chinese coming to the southern border trying to get into the United States. Their top talent wants out. They don't want to stay in that country because they're not going to be rewarded for their ingenuity.
And even the companies that are successful, now she wants them to share in other cities. He wants them to put to work some of the people that are unemployed. Not because they deserve to have the job, but because it's a sharing economy.
Yeah, and most of the people that get out of college that are going, they're going for government jobs because there's no other jobs for them to really go for where they can propel themselves. That's the only place to go. And in foreign investment in the countries dropping because they've been seizing foreign investment and arresting people from their stringent rules, such as spying. Anything like that, they're going to come in and capitalize, take your capital. Mm-hmm. And so all these things are going on. I mean, just to give you an example, the Chinese they banned cleavage on TV. They said video games are too much fun, and that kids' playtime should only be 1 hour a day.
Well,
I mean, and then they give quotes of people being punished for violating COVID. They would say, "Well, we're going to punish your family for 3 generations," and the one kid's response was, "Well, I'm the last generation because they're not having kids over there. Their fertility rate is the reverse. They need 2.1 kids for replacement. They're at 1.2, and they don't see it change."
And the population's getting older.
They have about the size of the United States and elderly people. Health problems, dementia is a huge.
Which is going to be another very, very big issue. Anyway, we're wrapping this up. Don't go away. After this commercial break, you want to come back? We've got a guest you want to hear. 2 guests, actually. We are going to be right back. Don't go away.
About Money with Mike Adams on AM 1300 The Answer. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com. About Money with your AFC team, Mike and Al, on AM 1300 The Answer. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
And we're back. And we have a guest. We have 2 guests here. Cindy Benezra and her daughter, Hannah. I don't know Hannah's last. Mitchel. And they own a company. Tell us about your company.
So our company is Elite Events, and we plan luxury parties around the world. We are based in Seattle and Palm Springs, and we take your event to the next level and make sure everyone's having a very fun time.
Tell us how you got started in event planning.
So, it's actually my mom growing up has always been throwing parties. She's been social little butterfly that she is. And so we always had people over. She got me really into, making everything look beautiful and just finding the joy in the simple things. So when I went to college in San Diego, there was an event management program. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to be in the sun in San Diego. So I joined the program, and ever since then I've been hooked. And I graduated from San Diego State. I moved to Boston. I planned for one of the top planners out there at the time. I became quickly the New England regional coordinator, and I did New England, all 6 states plus New York. And then eventually my mom was sick of me not being home anymore, so she...
It was 9 years. It was 9 years. That's way too long.
Yeah, so she kind of bribed me to come home, just being like, hey, you always said you wanted to, work together and start our own company. How about we come back to Seattle and see what happens? So...
It's sort of like what every good mother does, eventually try to get your children back home, is they bribe your children. You bribe them.
Or they use guilt like my mother-in-law did.
A little of both.
So you brought her into the business then?
Yeah. She's my boss.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, which is a different dynamic.
So how did that explain? Tell us how that works.
Oh, just day to day. I think it's really interesting. For some reason, it was a struggle at first, having the mother work for the daughter. I found that right away I just said, listen, I get it. I've worked before, you're the boss, I listen to you. So we just stepped into our roles pretty quickly, and we also come from families that have businesses, so it was a pretty easy step, but she's my boss, and so I listen to what she has to say.
See, I grew up in a family business, and my father could never get over that. He'd have to listen to me. That wasn't going to work.
Yeah. It was definitely hard at first. It was hard for me to tell her what to do because I felt like I was being disrespectful. And I'd be like, no, that's not okay. Like, do it this way. I just felt so bad. But she's like, no, this is what we need to do. This is how we get our groove. So,
So you plan events all over the world. So tell us more about that.
So right now we're mainly doing, the United States, Canada, Hawaii, this area. We would love to go to Europe. So if anyone wants to get married in Europe, just let us know, especially Italy. But destination events is our bread and butter, especially I think since I was planning in New England, like from Boston, but I would do events in New York, different states. We can go see the venue once and we can plan the wedding, just, be there again on the day of. Ideally, it's wonderful if you can go multiple times. Like I just got back yesterday from a planning trip in Mexico, which was our second time there. We got to do all the finalization meetings with the vendors. It's just nice to do that. But theoretically, we could plan a wedding and have never seen the venue before.
Oh, okay.
So you just got to be really creative. And my mom is... she specializes in design, and so we always collaborate on the design elements for everything, and she has so many magical, whimsical ideas that just take everything over the top. It's really fun to explore, and then I kind of bring it down to reality, being like, that doesn't make sense. How would we do that? That's $1 million. But it's a good pairing, because she kind of brings me out of my box.
So the client gives you a budget of what they want, and then you go from there. Kind of. Okay.
The Northwest is really thriving in luxury events. Maybe one would not think that's happening, but ever since COVID, we've noticed a trend that pretty much like 100% show up to events, whereas it was like, what do you think, 20 or 30% wouldn't show? And now it's full attendance, and also people are just kind of like, you know what, let's go for it. We're going to throw this event. And one thing about weddings, or funerals, things, there's life goes on, and you can't really control that, and people want to celebrate. What COVID didn't prevent that.
And Mike and I have been talking about that for the last couple of years because they've been talking about recession. Because they've seen what's called sales at like Walmart and stuff. People are not buying stuff because what they did, they overbought during COVID, right?
Toilet paper.
I'm going to be home. I'm going to buy the desk, or I'm going to the office at home, and the equipment to exercise and all that stuff. And so that dropped off after COVID. But what they neglected to realize that people wanted to get out and do stuff.
Yeah.
Airlines, cruises, all that stuff is been through the roof. People want to get out and experience things because they sat around for 2 years going, okay, twiddling my thumbs, I'm tired of doing this. If someone invites me, I'm going to go. Dang it.
Right. I also think it's reflection. You kind of look and go, hey, why am I saving this? Where is this going? Or maybe I should start living a little bit more and having an experience. Yeah.
Right.
So that's been a kind of a little bit of a shift in the industry for sure.
So take us through the planning for an event.
Oh, okay. So I do most of the day-to-day. My mom's always constantly involved. She's there for the main meetings, the launch meeting, the design meeting, oftentimes the day of. It did change a little bit during COVID just because my mom had some health issues when she got COVID really badly. But so how it typically starts is we'll meet with a couple. We'll learn all about them, everything that they dream of, everything they want, and then we create the initial budget breakdown, the B word, no one likes budgets, and we customize it for them just to see, where the things that are most important to them, we want to put more money there. Like if you don't really care so much about florals, then we'll just do a few statement pieces. We won't go overboard, things like that. Or if you don't care about your invitations, we could do digital if you want, which has been very popular since COVID, actually, where people have kind of stopped going along with the norms just because you have to do something, and just they're doing things more on their own.
That works in their budget, or that doesn't have that much value to them. Like most people are focusing a lot on alcohol, their wine. They're like, no, I like this wine. I'm not going to compromise. I like this kind of food. They're like kind of sticking to their guns a little bit, and they're not really going towards what our parents used to tell us what to do.
Exactly.
They're mixing it up. They're creating their own.
Yeah, or no first dance, no bouquet, no at our recent wedding, we had an aerialist at the ceremony from a tree hanging above a cliff that was doing this dance. And there was a moment we looked up, and it was magical, but very creative and very different. But to your point, so we for how the planning process is that we create the budget, we create the overall idea and the vision. We confirm that that everyone's on the same page. Like, this is what we envision for you. How do you feel? How do you like it? Let's tweak it. Once it's agreed on and perfected, then we just go ahead and execute. We get everything locked in, and we're really there with them side by side the entire process. Like, if they want us to go wedding dress shopping, we will go wedding dress shopping with them. If they want us to, they need help finding shoes for someone, we will help them with that. We do transportation, we do goodie bags, we do everything. So we only do take a few clients a year just so we can really fully focus on everyone. We want to know the grandma's name. We want to know something about the entire family, like we're part of their family.
And we often get to know the families afterwards because it's because we are a vintage boutique business and we focus more on luxury. It's sort of all inclusive, so we get to know what the family's like, and if they need clothing, then we're going to get them clothing. If they need a driver, we're right there with them. So it's a very personalized, and I think that's kind of our signature. It's just a niche market right now, and there's enough room for everybody in this industry. Everybody has their calling card, but we're not like cookie stamping out events, and that's kind of the unique thing about it.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Sounds like a great business.
Yeah, it's actually very good.
So you mentioned mostly weddings.
Right.
Do you do other events as well?
Mm-hmm. Specialty parties. So we haven't really focused too much on corporate, but I think we're more interested in doing design for corporate. So I'm just going to take this as a scenario. Like, for example, if the Kraken said, hey, yeah, you have to do our event. How do you get an octopus into the room, make a giant octopus? And then sometimes you go to these events and you're going who comes up with these ideas? You're and that's kind of where we come. We could just take any room, transform it, where it doesn't even look like a warehouse, and that's our niche. Mm-hmm. And most event planners, they do strictly corporate, where they're just doing a convention style. So there's so many different aspects to this business. But since COVID happened, a lot of businesses have folded up. So there's less resources for us to go and source things out, and that's been a little bit of a struggle. So we're hoping that more people will kind of go back and find their niche in that, so that we could
source different event items from them, because it is harder. Costs are going up because of it. From how I understand it, in the floral market, for example, one of the top 3 floral growers in the world collapsed during COVID. So now everyone's just going for those 2 other floral markets, and flowers are just through the roof. You can ask anyone in the industry. It's almost 2x. It's insane. So it's just repercussions of that. I mean, as you're seeing in every industry right now, just costs going up and labor and things like that. So we are hopeful that eventually more people will dive back into the event industry, and we can collaborate with them.
Now, Cindy, you also are an author too. You wrote a book.
Yes.
Under the Orange, and I read it. It was a story.
I'm so impressed that you read it. Thank you.
We're going to come back and talk about that.
Okay.
But first, tell people how they could get a hold of you if they want you to plan their event.
Absolutely. So our website is eliteseattle.com. We're on Instagram at Elite Events Seattle. And my email is hannah@eliteseattle.com. I am always on my phone and my computer, so you can reach me anytime.
What's your phone number?
Oh, thank you very much. 206-579-4884.
So give us your email address and website again.
Yes, it is Hannah, HANNAH, @eliteseattle.com. And phone number again, 206-579-4884. Website is eliteseattle.com.
And we'll be right back after this commercial break. Don't go away. We've got so much more. You want to hear about this autobiography.
About Money continues. Remember the website, adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Here's your AFC team, Mike and Al.
So Cindy, before we got the name of your company, we were talking about your book, Under the Orange Blossom. I read it, and it was a fascinating story, and I know it's a hard thing to talk about, but tell us a little bit about the book and what inspired you to write it.
Well, actually, it was interesting because Hannah, I bribed her to start this business and to move up here. That's a fact. And during this process, I said, "Hey, I'll give you 5 years. I'm yours. Let's create this business." But I've always wanted to write this story, and within the 5 years, I was able to write it on my time off. And then now I'm at the point where I'm just doing marketing for elite events, and I'm focusing on the marketing of my book, Under the Orange Blossoms. And the reason I'm an advocate for sexual abuse survivors, and I'm very passionate about this. I was always just terrified of talking about it, but I would share it among small groups. And the more that I realized when I would share my story, they say it's more, but it's 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys who have been sexually accosted. And I found that statistic like, well, how come I've never heard of these people? These people are not talking to me. I don't know these things. But then when I started really recognizing in writing my book and sharing my story that, well, there comes a lot of shame with it. Mm-hmm. And so people don't want to talk about this. I mean, it's just something that they cover up, or they don't want to share that experience. And I get it. It's not cocktail-worthy conversation. I mean, how do you come up with this? So when I was going through my book, I understood like the struggles of this conversation. Mm-hmm. I became very passionate about writing this book, and I'm glad I did it. But I have to say, I would not recommend writing through trauma. It's a very hard process, and I was able to have, I wrote the book out of sequence, and I was able to have a therapist to write the traumatic part of it, but I was very conscious about the listener, or the reader, excuse me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the part that got me was when the part where you tell your mother-in-law. That one made the hair stand on my neck.
Oh yeah, she's just a love. I have to tell you, it was really, we all get different strengths from different people, and sometimes they come not necessarily in your family. It could be a friend, mm-hmm. and she was sort of what fed me and realize emotionally that she gave me the tools where I could think, like, okay, this is what somebody's, standing up and holding your hand through the process. And it was very healing. And I was in my 50s, and I don't know, I think I'm a pretty well-developed person, but, there's always growth everywhere. It doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So take us through the publishing, self-publishing process. That's an interesting process.
Yeah, that's changing. Now that we have Amazon and, you could self-publish, that industry is really shifting. I don't know exactly where it's going, but a traditional publisher will take you. There's more street credibility if you get a traditional publisher, but you still have to do your own marketing. And if you self-publish, you take out that expense because you have to work within a budget. You have a set budget, and you're like, okay, I'm going to do all of this within this set budget. But if you're self-publishing, then you take out that number that it would cost for a publisher. So now you have more money to spend on marketing. It is harder, but the reality of it, there's not any true money to be made, in books now, unless you're like an incredibly top writer. But you do it for passion. You do it because you have a story to share. You do it because there's probably some truth in it, that mm-hmm. you feel like I need to share this. And that was kind of my story. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you wanted to connect with other people, and the people, hey, you're not the only one out there that this happened to.
Right. Yes. That I just felt that. Who are these other 4? Who's the 6 out there? I guess we're millions, but who are these millions?
Yeah.
And through this process, I've heard incredible stories. I've had, because we are in the event business, sometimes we're doing an event, somebody will come and like, hey, Cindy, I love what you're doing. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. We're ready to start, raising the paddle pretty soon here. But then they'll tell me, like, and specifically men will tell me, like, that happened to me in school. I had a babysitter. And I'm always blown away by their sincerity. And I always ask, like, have you ever told anybody? They're like, oh my gosh, never. Like, this has changed my relationship. This has changed my sexuality. And I'm thinking, okay, there's the 6, there's the 1 in 6 when I'm talking to men. Mm-hmm. And women share it in a different way. They're a lot more, they'll share it in social media. Men are just sort of, they'll just tell me straight up, like, this happened, but I'm not going to share it. So when I hear those numbers, it makes me more compelled to say, like, hey, there are the numbers out there, and this happens all the time, and things have to change, and we do have a broken system. I mean, when you can't report, so if you have therapy and it's happening to a child, you cannot, the therapist has to report that. So it's a prevention into getting help, and so it's a serious issue. It's almost epidemic, and it's definitely something that needs to be talked about. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we see a lot of problems today with kids being online, getting picked up online and being trafficked online that way.
Right, human
abuse
trafficking.
online.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so that's a terrible problem that's going on today, because so many kids have access to those phones and get on there, and they might have some other issues, and that gets exploited when they meet somebody online who tells them what they want to hear. And
right. I just heard a fact that in human trafficking, that slavery is kind of at a all-time high right now because of human trafficking.
Yeah.
Just crazy.
Yeah.
It is crazy.
Mm-hmm. It's sad. It's truly, truly a sad state of affairs.
So tell people the name of the book and where they can find it.
Sure.
And where they can purchase the book.
So you could reach out to me at www.cindytalks.com. And I have a blog there, and you could look at my podcasting, get my book there. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to me, and that's www.cindytalks.com.
And the name of the book?
And the name of the book is Under the Orange Blossoms.
And where can they find it?
Boy, at any place that sells books.
Amazon,
Amazon,
sure.
yes,
that's where
exactly.
I bought my copy.
Right, yeah.
And it really is a good read. It's a heartfelt read, and I enjoyed reading it. I enjoyed reading it. It was hard to read, but it's knowing you and seeing you. It was a good read to read. So.
Thank you. I think a lot of people think like, oh, it's going to be really tough, but it's actually, I'm trying to evoke hope that you will come through, and that you will get through, and that you can be successful, and you can heal, have fabulous relationships, and whatever your past is, it's your past. But if you choose to grow and heal, you can do it, and you will do it. Mm-hmm. I full-heartedly believe that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that just goes back to what I was saying in the first segment about China, right? You got Xi instilling a ideology on his people, right? And how many people are going to grow past that and actually move forward like you did, So,
yeah.
It's
a choice.
So, yes, it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for sharing. Thank you for the book.
Yes,
thank you for sharing your story. And
thank you for having
us.
us.
Maybe some listeners who are on the program really need to hear what you had to say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope so. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, books. The books I'm going to talk about are not the books like Cindy wrote. The books. And you can go and find hundreds or thousands of books on how to make money in the stock market, how to make money on options, how to make money with cryptocurrency, how to make money. And I believe that for the most part, people do make money. It's just a question of how much. If you start with $100,000 and you make $2, you're making money, but it's not a very good return on your investment. But what really got me going is Al and I were at a money show event, and one of the people there, one of the guys there, had written a book, and he gave me a copy of the book. And he asked me to critique it, which I finally got around to reading the book. He's not going to be really happy with my critique, but this is it. The book is called The Best Kept Secret on Wall Street. The author Stuart McGee. And its subtitle contains information that Wall Street would prefer you not have. It's like a secret. It's like a big secret. Nobody knows this. Only he does. Which I find really humorous because it's been the secret he says is it's widely publicized. It's not something that hasn't been around. In fact, I'll mention a book that had the same thing. It was written 50 years ago called A Random Walk Down Wall Street by Mitchel. So I find it kind of humorous, but he tells you that he's going to share his secret in chapter 1. And the secret is this, that active managers of mutual funds underperform. It's probably the first time you've ever heard that, right? Well, maybe not. But what he says is that passive investing does better. And now if you have been listening long, you know that we are active managers. And if you've been listening very long, you know that we don't accept averages. There's exceptions. And even McGee points it out, probably without meaning to do so. But this is a quote. He says, most longer-term data is skewed in favor of active managers. What's it mean? It means if you look at the long-term data, the active managers do better. Really? Then how can passive managers be better? What he says is why? 10 to 15-year performance almost always includes those active managers that have outperformed. And the underperforming managers are no longer managing. Guess what? If you go have a baseball team or a football team or a basketball team, the managers that underperform, they don't last very long either. The ones that perform well, they continue on. But he goes on to explain that active managers charge more, even though their performance is worse than passive. Now think about this. Active managers charge more, no question, than passive managers. But real active managers who do well last longer and the performance is better. So, is this new? Is this a secret? Think about it. We're going to come back after the commercial break and we'll talk more about this because I think it makes sense to hear.
About Money with the AFC team, Mike and Al on AM 1300, The Answer. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
So I've been talking about books. I've been talking about a book that I just read that was given to me to read and critique called The Best Secret on Wall Street, Best Kept Secret on Wall Street. Subtitle, contains information that Wall Street would prefer you not have. I've been talking about it because it is not something that's brand new. It's been around for a long time. There's been dozens of books before. One of the most popular books was written in 1985 called Winning the Loser's Game, Charles Ellis. Almost everybody in this industry has read that book. And what it says is, with very few exceptions, money managers underperform the market over a period of 10 years. Ellis puts it at 10%. I think that Standard & Poor's puts it at 4%, and we've seen some research that shows only 1% outperform the market. And we've been doing the outperforming the market for 18 years, but that's another story. But even that was not a new book because Mitchel, it's the 50-year anniversary of his book called A Random Walk Down Wall Street, where he said, there's no secret. Money managers don't do as well. You can do just as well randomly picking stocks as money managers do. So I read that book in 1987. I had licensed in 1986. I read the book. And after reading the book, I said, I've got to ask. I really got to ask. So I picked up the phone. I called Mitchel, and he answered the phone. And I said, I read your book. He said, thank you very much. I said, so I have a question for you, okay? I said, if it is really a random walk down Wall Street, how do you explain Warren Buffett? How do you explain John Templeton? How do you explain Roe Price? And how do you explain Ken Fisher? the senior, not the junior. Well, he said, there's exceptions. Some people do outperform, but it doesn't mean his book didn't sell millions of copies. It didn't mean that Winning the Loser's Game didn't sell millions of copies. I'm not sure that McGee's book is going to sell millions of copies, but it's been traveled before. So what is it about this whole thing with passive active managers? Think about it. Career Path of Mutual Fund Managers was a study published in 2014, and it said that 38% of mutual fund managers last less than 2 years. In 2 years, they're gone because they underperform. In 4 years, 69%, over 2/3 of mutual fund managers are gone because they underperform. And in 6 years, 80%, 4 out of every 5, are gone because they underperform. Only 7% make it 10 years or more. So when you average together the 93% of failed managers with the 7% that do better, guess what? Active managers look like they underperform passive management. And that's not a big thing because Jack Bogart, who started Vanguard Funds, has been selling that idea for 50 years. 50 years. Passive managers, and for most financial advisors, they're probably better off doing that because there's not very many people that actually outperform. Fundex did a research in which they found that they looked at 10,454 mutual funds and ETFs, and just 249 of those had survived 10 years under the same manager. Think about that. Only 2.5% of mutual funds survive 10 years. Think about Janus funds. They disappeared. They merged into other funds. And of those 249, some had high fees, some had low fees. The fees made no difference in the actual performance. All they had in common, those 249 funds, is every one of those 249 had exceptional performance. They outperformed the S&P 500 if that was their benchmark. They outperformed. That's why they lasted 10 years or longer. But it was Vanguard that sold the idea that passive funds outperform. And tremendous success. I mean, if you look at Vanguard, they've been doing this for 50 years, and it really has worked. So that got me to thinking, and we just went to the movie Oppenheimer. If you've seen it, if you haven't seen it, it's really a movie worth seeing. And Oppenheimer was the Manhattan Project. But at the same time there was the Manhattan Project, there was another project called the Statistical Research Group. Grew out of World War II. And the issue was to examine things statistically. Important things, like the issues of the armament of airplanes. If you put too little armor on an airplane, they easily get shot down. If you put too much armor, they aren't maneuverable and they get shot down. 5% too much or 5% too little can be the difference between winning and losing. So they looked at the planes that were flying, the fighter jets and the bombers that were flying, and they wanted to look at the bullet holes, the planes that were returning. And what they found is for every square foot in the engine compartment, there were 1.11 bullet holes. In the fuselage, 1.73. In the fuel system, 1.55. And the rest of the plane, 1.8 bullet holes for every square foot. So the question is, where's the greatest need to increase the armor on those planes? Generals had different thoughts. What do you think? The engine's 1.1, the fuselage 1.7, the fuel system 1.6, the rest of the plane 1.8. If it was your choice, where would you put the armor? So there was a statistician by the name of Abraham Walt, and what he said is it's not where the bullet holes are, but where the bullet holes are missing. There's no reason to believe that there should be any statistical difference between the number of bullet holes in any portion of that plane. And that, therefore, the planes that weren't returning had to have the most catastrophic returns because the bullets that hit that portion of the plane were causing the planes to come down. And the area which had the fewest holes was the engine. And what they found is that's where they needed to armor the planes. It wasn't an easy sale, by the way. But the point is, it's not the story that counts. It's looking at the numbers, and it's realizing what the numbers mean. Do you really think that McGee was telling a secret? When you read the book, his book, if you read his book, do you think you're being let in on something that no one else knows? You got the secret. Do you really think it's that? Does it make you feel good when you read something like that? The issue is that the numbers don't hold up. In the case of McGee, he had the right answer. The mutual fund managers that last the longest had the greatest performance. And those with poor performance didn't last long. 97.5 of the underperforming managers didn't make it to 10 years. Only 2.5% made it. So the fees count. The high fees and underperformance counted for 97.5. And my guess is that if you compared passive and active with the same fees, the 97% would still underperform. That's my guess. But you have to look. I had a phone call a while back, a few years, an asset lock program, a young guy over 30 years old, managing $100 million. He said accounts were limited to no more than 10% on the downside. And the worst drawdown it ever had was 10% in 2008, 2009. He said he'd been doing better than the Standard & Poor's since inception, but he wasn't willing to publish any numbers. If people are not willing to publish the numbers, how do you really know if they're part of the underperforming or overperforming? You don't. That's my secret for you today. We'll be back next Saturday to talk about money. We'll see you then.